All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Author Spotlight. Today we have the amazing Anthony Trucks. Has an incredible story and has a book out. I'm pretty sure your book is called Making
Ident-
Shift Happen.
Oh, it's called Identity Shift. What I do is I help you make shift happen. So the book helps you make shift happen. The book's called Identity Shift. It's a whole lot of shift going down on this side.
Well, I'm so excited to hear more about your story. You were foster kid turned NFL athlete, serial
Yeah.
entrepreneur. You just have so much under your belt. So excited to hear more about your story and more about, how you created the book and the publishing process and just more about it. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for being on the show, Author Spotlight. So for starters, tell us who Anthony Trucks is and more about your story.
Yeah. It's a great question. Who is Anthony Trucks? It's about identity, right? And the book's about identity. Weirdness, but all good is weirdness. I am a guy who, if I was to describe the things that are the core parts of my heart, I'm a man of God. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm also a speaker, a coach, and an author. I teach people to make shift happen. And that was a journey to get to that in the first place. I grew up in a lot of craziness as a kid and have had a really interesting life journey, we'll call it, of a lot of things that should knock you down. And they did. Don't get me wrong. I'm not perfect. I've got knocked down, but I just found out ways to get back up and create cool things out of life. And then once I realized that I had a kind of a knack of doing it and there would be a benefit to the world if I shared it, I started sharing it. And in doing so, created a cool process that I've run a ton of people through, a lot of big companies like Amazon and PayPal as well. And I chose to kind of, we'll call it, synthesize it down to a really cool book called Identity Shift that allows people to do the same thing. But as a human being, that's my thing, man. I like to enjoy life and help others enjoy life also.
Wow, I love that. And I like how you said that, right? Like you just realized you had a knack for it. And so you took that to like the next step of like, how am I going to implement this in other people's life? So tell us how you, I guess, figured out you have this knack for just like figuring out how to make life happen and like have a fun
Oh,
life.
yeah.
And tell us, the story of how you made it a book and what made you want to write the book, really.
Yeah. Yeah, no, those are all great questions. So I think it's like everybody else, the book came to be because life kept kicking my butt, man. They just kept it kept rearing its ugly head. And I mean, a lot of ways. Like I was adopted at a young age, but I still had this. I was adopted in an all-white family, so I had this weird diversity issue. Didn't know who I was or where I fit. I wanted to play sports, was really bad. Had to find a way to get good at sports, and then I finally got good at sports. Got a college scholarship. Then had a kid my sophomore year. Had to figure out how to navigate that. So I was a present father, still am. And so I was like a full-time student and a full-time dad and a full-time athlete. So a lot of that going on. Met my real dad my sophomore year of college, also the same kind of year I had my son. And then after the college world, I went to the NFL, which stands for not for long. So I went into that world, lost my career to an injury, came home, had two more kids and my wife. So now we're navigating that whole world, and then business starts falling apart. My body's falling apart. My ego and personal pride are just dashed because I have no identity of a football player. My marriage falls apart. All these things go tumbling down. And then I was in a fog for a lot of years. I unfortunately lost my adoptive mom to multiple sclerosis in 2015. 2014, April 15th, 2014. And it's just a weird kind of like up and down. And then I got to a point where I looked in the mirror one day and just didn't like me. And it was the best way to describe it. It wasn't, most people think like, oh, your mom passed away and it lit you up. And it did for a bit. But to be honest, the one thing that really, for some reason, like made me desire was this moment of like a look in the mirror and a shame for the man looking back. And that was the catalyst moment. And I decided like I had to figure this out. I made it that far, right? But I had so much more to go. And even getting that far was a journey, up and down and up and down. And I realized like I've done this before. Why am I here? How do I get out of here? And that's when I went back, started looking at what have I done? Every time when I was in the dark place, what did I do to get out of the place? And I started seeing like some through lines. And a lot of it was I just figured out who I was at a moment, what I wanted to have, and who I had to become to have the things I wanted. And I'd been doing it little by little. I wanted to be a better football player. Okay, what does a great football player do? Let me become that guy. He would do those things. I want to be a great dad. Let me become that guy. Do those things. And so little by little, I started figuring out. And then fast forward about 10 months of just a lot of deep work. I ended up getting my marriage back together. I got in great shape. I got the business running smooth. So like I've crossed a cool finish line of I figured out how to make some shift happen in my life. So much so that I've been able to be on television shows like American Ninja Warrior, hit buzzers on the show. I just got done with a show with Rob Lowe, a game show, which was super weird. I won some money though, so that was kind of cool. But a lot of weird things. And to be quite honest, in doing so, I started realizing that people enjoyed hearing my personal stories. Like, man, it's inspiring. And then I was like, great, inspiration's amazing, but how do I get you to have this in your life? How do I get you to have this level of what I feel? And so I started looking back and saying, what could I do as like breadcrumbs to guide people? And it turned into a process called the shift method that I started speaking on and coaching on and guiding on and been refining for a lot of years. And then I realized it's a very useful tool, like for everybody, anybody with an identity. And it got to be a book because over time people were like, how do you do this? And I was like, I got these programs. Like, well, I don't want to take a program. I just want to know how you did it. I was like, well,
Right.
listen to, it was like, how do I listen to podcasts? But you don't go into it in depth in a podcast. I'm like, all right. So then maybe it's a book. So I actually started slowly in the background. I self-published my like an autobiography years ago. And so the process I learned through that was like, what if I just took all the things that I wanted to, like, if I could pass on to my son, what are the lessons I want him to learn, right? And then what are the stories of my life that would attach to that? And then from there, like, what order would I put it in? And then, okay, from there, what stories do I attach to the different second? And that was it. And then it sat in my Evernote for like a year. And then I talked to a guy who was like, "Hey, you should write a book." I'm like, well, "I kind of have one. I haven't fully written yet." He's like, "Well, I got a guy that if you want, like, he can walk you through the process of publisher." And it's like I never done the publishing thing. I didn't know, like, do I want to go to the big publisher? I was like, I don't know if I want all that. So I talked to the guy, really good, down to earth guy, great publishing company, and it's not like the big wigs that go all crazy, right? So I was like, let's do it. So I turned that into a conversation about how do I become like an author with these guys, and they pretty much just took what I already had in place and just gave me the best order and then went through the process of publishing, which is I finally started writing the book. I got it edited, got a cover made, interior design, loaded on Amazon, and now we're in distribution. It's going to go out in August, right? So the process to it was genuinely like an organic flow. It was like I'm living my life, and then in living my life, I was excelling in life, and then people want to know how I did it. So I built a business around teaching people. And then I was like, all right, how do I teach more people that maybe don't want to invest in coaching, or who just want an introduction to the concept and try it on their own? And that's how the book came to pass. So that's the journey of, I guess, my life in a nutshell onto where the book came to be.
That's really cool. And I love that, like you said, it happened really organically. Like you're speaking about it, and then people are like, I don't want to invest in the coaching, but how'd you do it? And so, getting connected with the right people. So that kind of answered my next question, what made you think you could publish this book when, especially self-publishing, because
Scary.
I think a lot of people get, a little, it's like fearful of like, it's not going to go well, or I don't know how to do it. And so that kind of answered the next question of, what made you believe you could do it? The right
Yeah, I did
people.
that. I went that journey. That was the first book. I wrote my first book in 7 days and self-published it. It's 333 pages. I locked myself in a room in Sparks, Nevada, and I just poured everything. It's an autobiography, so it's more of like a recounting of life. So I just thought about stuff. Very emotional to write. It was very. I locked myself away because I'd read the first chapter and it was so like emotionally draining that I just didn't touch it for 8 months. And I was like, I got to get this done. So I drove to Sparks, Nevada from California. I sat in a room. Here's what I did. I went to the super Walmart and I bought enough food for a week. And then I went to this room and it was like upstairs, downstairs. I didn't leave the room for a week. I went to the bathroom. I didn't even shower. I slept on the couch. I would get up and write. I would fall asleep. I get up and write. I just kept doing that and eating food and going to the bathroom on that one level. And then 7 days later, I had a book written. And then I went into a different website, like to find someone that could create the cover, worked back and forth to make the cover, and then had an interior designer to create the interior design, got the ISBN, went to, at the time it was, what was it? Now it's Kindle Direct, but then it used to be Create Space. And I got it put up online, and it turned into a book that starts selling, and people still buy it. I still sell the book. It's pretty cool. But I do, because then you're like, well, why does anybody got to hear my story? Why is my story important? Why should anybody read my book? And you do get in that internal, the echo chamber of all the reasons why it shouldn't be put out there. And then I had somebody early on that gave me this insight. They're like, at the end of the day, you can't give your energy to the people that don't want it. And so if you give your energy to the direction of people who don't care about the book, then it's not going to go out, because that's what you care about. But if you care about the people who will benefit from it, who need to read that book, like, do it for them, even if the other ones want to get in your way. And so I did. I pushed it out, and that became the journey. But it is a very interesting internal battle to put it out with the imposter syndrome, the why me syndrome, the all the conversations as to why, but I promise you, the moment you put it out and somebody goes, holy crap, this book changed my life, it all disappears.
Totally. And even if it's just like that one person who then
Yeah.
sends it to someone they know, right? Like it's just a domino effect. And I think that's like, it's like the most beautiful part about writing a book. Like, even though it's really healing and like, even though it was emotional draining for you, but like it's healing process of writing it. And then you get in that imposter syndrome and you're like, oh my God, am I actually going to like publish this? Is like, people are actually going to read this. It's pretty vulnerable. But once
Yeah,
you like get that feedback of even just that one person, it changes the whole game.
it does.
And so, I guess my other question was, what gives you most productivity when you're writing? But you
Mm.
literally locked yourself in a room for 7
Yeah,
days. So
I
that
did.
got to be productive there.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I don't think that does. I think we can easily find ways to seclude ourselves. So a lot of the coaching I do, it actually guides us through processes to get that dialed in. Because just because you have a plan doesn't mean the plan gets followed. And productivity, I think, is a matter of, from in my opinion, is clarity and focus, and then discipline. Discipline's a hard thing, but it's easier if I have clarity of what I'm doing and I know how to teach my brain to stay focused. And so in the beginning, like when I wrote the first book, it was easy to stay clear. I knew my story. Focus was the thing I went away for, and I could stay focused if I turned things off. I played the right music. I had the right cup of tea. I'm a tea guy. And that's how I stayed on. So when I would wake up, when I get the daytime would begin, I kind of knew how to set my physical environment to get my mind engaged. And then the first 10 minutes were always difficult. The first 10 minutes, I'm thinking about everything that was already on my mind. But once I'm in, it drowns out. And so I took that to the second book I wrote. And in fact, I wrote that book, I want to say from start to finish, it was probably about 20 days. It's less than 20 days. And I'm capsuling top to bottom. If I was to just segment myself as a full-time dad, as a business owner, as a speaker, all that, I still got it done in that much time. And all I did was say, okay, great. I'd done this work to organize and segment. So I was clear on what I had to get done, what the chapter's about. I was clear on all that. I knew the stories. I knew it all, right? I'd done the work. I should have put on paper now. When I sat down to write, I had my family around. I had noise canceling headphones on and TV in the background and my family all around. I just sat there and put an egg timer. In fact, this egg timer, and my egg timer was like, all right, we're working in like 15-minute blocks. And I would just start going to work. And I would put the music on. I'd have my cup of tea, which I got my cup of tea right here still, and have the right music in place. And I would just go. And about 5-10 minutes in, I'm in. And I tell my family, do not talk to me. Act like I'm a ghost.
No
Don't wave.
distractions.
Yeah, don't wave your hand, because if my brain goes away, when I come back, I lose it. And so I pretty much just wrote a chapter a day for about 10 days. Now they were spaced out. I would do one chapter on one day, the next chapter 2 days later, like it was kind of spaced out over 20 days. But essentially 10 chapters was about 10 days. And once I sat down and did it, it got spun out.
Totally. And that's like, I think something that's kind of innate in athletes is like having a structure and like, this is my goal of like, when you go into the weight room, right? It's like, my goal is I'm going to put another plate on this rack or whatever it is. So you got to like give yourself, a goal or like a timer. I love that. I used to do that. I feel like in school all the time. Like, all right, I'm going to study for like 25 minutes and I'll go get a break or whatever it
Yeah.
is. So you got to give yourself those segments to keep productivity. So I love that.
Yeah.
So you've published 2 books now, and one is an autobiography. The other is kind of your coaching all in one book, but it kind of ties into your autobiography.
Yeah, all of my life.
How has publishing your book improved your life or changed your life?
Oh man. Well, because of the fact that I'm a guy that talks for a living, right? What I talk about has to come from thoughts. And I think the problem is a lot of people haven't fleshed out their thoughts. They think about them as they talk about them, but they don't spend time quietly formulating them, like letting them simmer, making better clarity points or better connection points, or thinking about how do I explain this in a cleaner, clearer way. And so what's benefited my life is like I'm able to communicate my value better to organizations, to my clients. I'm able to serve at a higher level because when I sit down and write the book, just me going through and saying, if I had to give the top, 10 points to my son, what would those 10 points be? I'm now thinking about the most important ones. Why are they important? How do you explain this, right? And then I put it in. So when I go talk to somebody, I can clearly explain that in a simple way. Then writing the book, I was like, well, I want to write this book for people, not for scientists, not for, the researchers. Like this is supposed to be for my son and anybody above him, right? He's, 11th grade going into senior, right? Usually write books like 9th, 10th grade level. I'm like, what if I wrote a book that was just one that anybody could pick up and they can understand. So in doing that, you have to understand the concept to simplify it. So I went through that whole process. So now when I look at my life, I am able to get better bookings, to get paid more for speeches, and to be able to clearly explain my thought process way better because of the process I had to go through for the book. It was like a phenomenal filter to filter my mind's thoughts into communication.
Wow, yeah, I love that. And we talk here at Self Published in 30 Days a lot. We say like your book is your brand. And so like people looking at you as a coach or as, you know, the speaker, and then they see you have a book, they're like, oh, this guy like really knows what he's talking about, right? Like he has a book out there. And that's really cool too, because you can reach a bigger audience and say like, hey man, like great connected with you. Don't have time to chat. Here's my book. And then that
Yeah,
brings you more business, you know what I mean? So
definitely.
I love all of this. Your story is really incredible. But where can my audience and the audience listening to Author Spotlight, where can they find more about you and your books?
Yeah. Easiest way is on Instagram. If you go to @AnthonyTrucks on Instagram, that's where I live and hang out. Not actually live. It'd be weird if I lived in the phone. But no, that's where I'm spending most of my personal time. And then the book itself, it comes out August 24th. You can pre-order it now. If you go to identityshiftbook.com, there's 3 steps. You go buy the book on Amazon, you come back to the page with a receipt and this code, which is SPN30. SPN30 will get you pretty much some cool free things. You get, when the book comes out, the first 10 people that put the code in, they'll get a signed autographed copy from me, which is actually got it right here's what it looks like. Hey, it's the book, but you get a
Uh,
signed copy. And then everybody, including them, but everybody will get the audiobook, the digital books you can read on your phone or your tablet, whatever you want, and then also a workbook that goes along with it. Because I find that in the book, there's some great tactics and structure, but then it'd be easier like if you had a workbook to guide yourself through the process. And so I took some of the best kind of assessments and segments and modules in my coaching programs and put them into a really clear, clean workbook that I probably would sell for like $100 or more easily, and I just give away for free. So that way you go there, use the code, audiobook, digital book, and a cool workbook for free just from buying the book.
Wow, that's really cool and really innovative. I really like interactive books. My colleague Taj Deshawn, I'm sure, I don't know if you've known him, but he past athlete, and his book is very much interactive like that. And it honestly is a game changer, especially when it's like coaching techniques, because you're like, I'm reading about it, but like, what do I do now? Like, you know. So love that. So make sure to go use the code SPN30 to get all that cool stuff. And last question for you, Anthony. What is your parting piece of advice to the person that's listening who maybe desires to publish a book and share their stories or their expertise with the world? What is your advice to them?
Mm. There's always one statement that I love, and it's a little pokey, but not too pokey. And the statement is own your shift. And that's one that has to do with like personal growth. But I find that the reason we don't do things because we as human beings aren't at the level we should be operating to actually have the dream we want be real. Like our dream is typically above the level we're vibrating and doing things right now. So own your shift is at face value, own your stuff. However, it's 3 words. And the first one's own, which essentially means own there's something you got to work on to improve. It could be getting past the imposter syndrome. It could be sitting down and focusing. It could be a myriad of different things. But own that you got something to work on first, because then you give yourself permission to improve. Then no matter what's happened to us in life, it is your responsibility to work on it. It may not have been your fault. My foster care world was not my fault, but it was my responsibility to make my life what it is. So once you know that it's something you can work on, own it, and then you know it's your job, the next thing is to shift. Now, a lot of people in life, they know there's stuff to work on and it's their duty, but they do nothing. And they sit in that same synergistic cycle of suck. And so for me, I'm like, go do the work, shift. And that's literally a both internal and verbal external thing. So if you shift the way you operate inside, it's an identity shift in my world, it'll change the way your life is outside. So if you want something more, if you want to go and make more money, have more time, be a published author, you have to own your shift.
Wow. I want to write that on my like mirror every morning. Like own your shift, man. Go get stuff done and own up to it.
Yeah,
That's amazing. Um, Anthony, thank you so much for being Author Spotlight. It was a pleasure speaking with you. Make sure to go follow him on Instagram. I think you said at Anthony Trucks. And make sure to use the code SPN30 when you're pre-ordering his book that comes out in August. Was that correct?
Yep. August 24th. Yes.
August 24th. Man, I'm excited. I'm about to go do that right now.
Yeah, me too. It's creeping up. Oh, it's creeps up
Creeping
on us.
up. starting to lie. I know. Well, thank you so much again for being on the podcast. We really appreciate you and sharing your story. There's so much power to that. So kudos to you, man.
Thank you.